Chapter 25. When I reached Morningside, the shooting sounded like a distant celebration of the 4th of July, and I hurried forward. At St. Nicholas the street lights were out. A thunderous sound arose and I saw 4 men running toward me pushing something that jarred the walk. It was a safe. "Say," I began. "Get the hell out the way." I leaped aside, into the street, and there was a sudden and brilliant suspension of time, like the interval between the last axe stroke and the felling of a tall tree, in which there had been a loud noise followed by a loud silence. Then I was aware of figures crouching in doorways and along the curb, then time burst and I was down in the street, conscious but unable to rise, struggling against the street and seeing the flashes as the guns went off back at the corner of the avenue, aware to my left of the men still speeding the rumbling safe along the walk as back up the street. Behind me, 2 policemen, almost invisible in black shirts, thrust flaming pistols before them. One of the safe rollers pitched forward, and farther away, past the corner, a bullet struck an auto tire, the released air shrieking like a huge animal in agony. I rolled, flopping around, willing myself to crawl closer to the curb but unable, feeling a sudden wet warmth upon my face and seeing the safe shooting wildly into the intersection and the men rounding the corner into the dark, pounding, gone now, as the skittering safe bounded off at a tangent, shot into the intersection and lodged in the third rail and sent up a curtain of sparks that lit up the block like a blue dream, a dream I was dreaming and through which I could see the cops braced as on a target range, feet forward, free arms akimbo, firing with deliberate aim. "Get hold of emergency," one of them called, and I saw them turn and disappear where the dull glint of trolley rails faded off into the dark. Suddenly the block leaped alive. Men who seemed to rise up out of the sidewalks were rushing into the storefronts above me, their voices rising excitedly. And now the blood was in my face and I could move, getting to my knees as someone out of the crowd was helping me to stand. "You hurt, Daddy?" "Some, I don't know, I couldn't quite see them." "Damn. He's got a hole in his head," a voice said. A light flashed in my face, came close. I felt a hard hand upon my skull and moved away. "Hell, it's just a nick," a voice said. "One them 45s hit your little finger, you got to go down." "Well, this one over here is gone down for the last time," someone called from the walk. "They got him clean." I wiped my face, my head ringing. Something was missing. "Here, buddy, this yours?" It was my briefcase, extended to me by its handles. I seized it with sudden panic, as though something infinitely precious had almost been lost to me. "Thanks," I said, peering into their dim, blue-tinted features. I looked at the dead man. He lay face forward, the crowd working around him. I realized suddenly that it might have been me huddled there, feeling too that I had seen him there before, in the bright light of noon, long ago. How long? Knew his name, I thought, and suddenly my knees flowed forward. I sat there, my fist that gripped the briefcase bruising against the street, my head slumped forward. They were going around me. "Get off my foot, man," I heard. "Quit shoving. There's plenty for everybody." There was something I had to do and I knew that my forgetfulness wasn't real, as one knows that the forgotten details of certain dreams are not truly forgotten but evaded. I knew, and in my mind I was trying to reach through the gray veil that now seemed to hang behind my eyes as opaquely as the blue curtain that screened the street beyond the safe. The dizziness left and I managed to stand, holding on to my briefcase, pressing a handkerchief to my head. Up the street there sounded the crashing of huge sheets of glass and through the blue mysteriousness of the dark the walks shimmered like shattered mirrors. All the street signs were dead, all the day sounds had lost their stable meaning. Somewhere a burglar alarm went off, a meaningless spelunky sound, followed by the joyful shouts of looters. "Come on," someone called nearby. "Let's go, buddy," the man who had helped me said. He took my arm, a thin man who carried a large cloth bag slung over his shoulder. "The shape you in wouldn't do to leave you round here," he said. "You act like you drunk." "Go where?" I said. "Where?" Hell, man. Everywhere. We get to moving, no telling where we might go. Hey, Dupre. He called. Say, man, goddamn. Don't be calling my name so loud, a voice answered. Here, I am over here, getting me some work shirts. Get some for me, do, he said. All right, but don't think I'm your papa, the answer came. I looked at the thin man, feeling a surge of friendship. He didn't know me, his help was disinterested. Hey, do, he called, we go and do it? Hell yes, soon as I get me these shirts. The crowd was working in and out of the stores like ants around spilled sugar. From time to time there came the crash of glass, shots, fire trucks in distant streets. How you feel? The man said. Still fuzzy, I said, and weak. Let's see if it's stopped bleeding. Yeah, you'll be all right. I saw him vaguely though his voice came clear. Sure, I said. Man, you lucky you ain't dead. These son savages is really shooting now, he said. Over on Lennox they was aiming up in the air. If I could find me a rifle, I'd show 'em. Here, take you a drink of this good scotch, he said, taking a quart bottle from a hip pocket. I got me a whole case stashed what I got from a liquor store over there. Over there all you got to do is breathe, and you drunk, man. Drunk. 100 proof bonded whiskey flowing all in the gutters. I took a drink, shuddering as the whiskey went down but thankful for the shock it gave me. There was a bursting, tearing movement of people around me, dark figures in a blue glow. Look at them take it away, he said, looking into the dark action of the crowd. Me, I'm tired. Was you over on Lennox? No, I said, seeing a woman moving slowly past with a row of about a dozen dressed chickens suspended by their necks from the handle of a new straw broom. Hell, you ought to see it, man. Everything is tore up. By now the woman's is picking it clean. I saw one ole woman with a whole side of a cow on her back. Man, she was bout bent bow-legged trying to make it home. Here come Dupre now, he said, breaking off. I saw a little hard man come out of the crowd carrying several boxes. He wore 3 hats upon his head, and several pairs of suspenders flopped about his shoulders, and now as he came toward us I saw that he wore a pair of gleaming new rubber hip boots. His pockets bulged and over his shoulder he carried a cloth sack that swung heavily behind him. Damn, Dupre, my friend said, pointing to his head, you got one of them for me? What kind is they? Dupre stopped and looked at him. With all them hats in there and I'm going to come out with anything but a Dobbs? Man, are you mad? All them new, pretty colored Dobbs? Come on, let's get going before the cops get back. Damn, look at that thing blaze. I looked toward the curtain of blue fire, through which vague figures toiled. Dupre called out and several men left the crowd and joined us in the street. We moved off, my friend, Schofield, the others called him, leading me along. My head throbbed, still bled. Looks like you got you some loot too, he said, pointing to my briefcase. Not much, I said, thinking, loot? Loot? And suddenly I knew why it was heavy, remembering Mary's broken bank and the coins, and now I found myself opening the briefcase and dropping all my papers, my Brotherhood identification, the anonymous letter, along with Clifton's doll, into it. Fill it up, man. Don't you be bashful. You wait till we tackle one of these pawn shops. That dude's got him a cotton-picking sack full of stuff. He could go into business. Well, I'll be damned, a man on the other side of me said. I thought that was a cotton sack. Where'd he get that thing? He brought it with him when he come north, Schofield said. Du swears that when he goes back he'll have it full of $10 bills. Hell, after tonight he'll need him a warehouse for all the stuff he's got. You fill that briefcase, buddy. Get yourself something. No, I said, I've enough in it already. And now I remembered very clearly where I'd started out for but could not leave them. Maybe you're right, Schofield said. How I know, you might have it full of diamonds or something. A man oughtn't to be greedy. Though it's time something like this happened. We moved along. Should I leave, get onto the district? Where were they, at the birthday celebration? How did all this get started? I said. Schofield seemed surprised. Damn if I know, man. A cop shot a woman or something. Another man moved close to us as somewhere a piece of heavy steel rang down. Hell, that wasn't what started it, he said. It was that fellow, what's his name? Who? I said. What's his name? That young guy. You know, everybody's mad about it. Clifton, I thought. It's for Clifton. A night for Clifton. Aw man, don't tell me, Schofield said. Didn't I see it with my own eyes? About 8 o'clock down on Lenox and 123rd this Patty slapped a kid for grabbing a baby Ruth and the kid's mama took it up and then the Patty slapped her and that's when hell broke loose. You were there? I said. Same's I'm here. Some fellow said the kid made the Patty mad by grabbing a candy named after a white woman. Damn if that's the way I heard it, another man said. When I come up they said a white woman set it off by trying to take a black gal's man. Damn who started it, Dupree said. All I want is for it to last a while. It was a white gal, all right, but that wasn't the way it was. She was drunk, another voice said. But it couldn't have been Sybil, I thought, it had already started. You wanna know who started it? A man holding a pair of binoculars called from the window of a pawn shop. You want really to know? Sure, I said. Well, you don't need to go no further. It was started by that great leader, Ras the Destroyer. That monkey chaser. Someone said. Listen, bastard. Don't nobody know how it started, Dupree said. Somebody has to know, I said. Schofield held his whiskey toward me. I refused it. Hell, man, it just exploded. These is dog days, he said. Dog days? Show, this hot weather. I tell you they mad over what happened to that young fellow, what's his name? We were passing a building now and I heard a voice calling frantically, colored store. Colored store. Then put up a sign, Mother Fowler, a voice said. You probably rotten as the others. Listen at the bastard. For one time in his life he's glad to be colored, Schofield said. Colored store, the voice went on automatically. Hey. You sure you ain't got some white blood? No, sir. The voice said. Should I bust him, man? For what? He ain't got a damn thing. Let the Mother Fowler alone. A few doors away we came to a hardware store. This is the first stop, men, Dupree said. What happens now? I said. Who you? He said, cocking his thrice-hatted head. Nobody, just one of the boys, I began. You sure you ain't somebody I know? I'm pretty sure, I said. He's all right, said Schofield. Them cops shot him. Dupree looked at me and kicked something, a pound of butter, sending it smearing across the hot street. We fixing to do something what needs to be done, he said. First we gets a flashlight for everybody. And let's have some organization, y'all. Don't everybody be running over everybody else. Come on. Come on in, buddy, Schofield said. I felt no need to lead or leave them, was glad to follow, was gripped by a need to see where and to what they would lead. And all the time the thought that I should go to the district was with me. We went inside the store, into the dark glinting with metal. They moved carefully, and I could hear them searching, sweeping objects to the floor. The cash register rang. Here's some flashlights over here, someone called. How many? Dupree said. Plenty, man. Okay, pass out one to everybody. They got batteries. Nah, but there's plenty them too, 'bout a dozen boxes. Okay, give me one with battery so I can find the buckets. Then every man get him a light. Here's some buckets over here, Schofield said. Then all we got to find is where he keeps the oil. Oil? I said. Coal oil, man. And hey, y'all, he called, don't nobody be smoking in here. I stood beside Schofield listening to the noise as he took a stack of zinc buckets and passed them out. Now the store leaped alive with flashing lights and flickering shadows. Keep them lights down on the floor, Dupree called. No use letting folks see who we are. Now when you get your buckets, line up and let me fill 'em. Listen to Ole do lay it down, he's a bitch, ain't he, buddy? He always liked to lead things. And always leading me into trouble. What are we getting ready to do? I said. You'll see, Dupre said. Hey, you over there. Come on from behind that counter and take this bucket. Don't you see ain't nothing in that cash register, that if it was I'd have it myself? Suddenly the banging of buckets ceased. We moved into the back room. By the light of a flash I could see a row of fuel drums mounted on racks. Dupre stood before them in his new hip boots and filled each bucket with oil. We moved in slow order. Our buckets filled, we filed out into the street. I stood there in the dark feeling a rising excitement as their voices played around me. What was the meaning of it all? What should I think of it, do about it? With this stuff, Dupre said, we better walk in the middle of the street. It's just down around the corner. Then as we moved off, a group of boys ran among us and the men started using their lights, revealing darting figures in blonde wigs, the tails of their stolen dress coats flying. Behind him in hot pursuit came a gang armed with dummy rifles taken from an Army and Navy store. I laughed with the others, thinking, a holy holiday for Clifton. Put out them lights. Dupre commanded. Behind us came the sound of screams, laughter, ahead the footfalls of the running boys, distant fire trucks, shooting, and in the quiet intervals, the steady filtering of shattered glass. I could smell the kerosene as it sloshed from the buckets and slapped against the street. Suddenly Schofield grabbed my arm. Good God, look yonder. And I saw a crowd of men running up pulling a Borden's milk wagon, on top of which, surrounded by a row of railroad flares, a huge woman in a gingham pinafore sat drinking beer from a barrel which sat before her. The men would run furiously a few paces and stop, resting between the shafts, run a few paces and rest, shouting and laughing and drinking from a jug, as she on top threw back her head and shouted passionately in a full-throated voice of blues singer's timbre, if it hadn't been for the referee, Joe Louis woulda killed Jim Jeffrey free beer, sloshing the dipper of beer around. We stepped aside, amazed, as she bowed graciously from side to side like a tipsy fat lady in a circus parade, the dipper like a gravy spoon in her enormous hand. Then she laughed and drank deeply while reaching over nonchalantly with her free hand to send quart after quart hot milk crashing into the street. And all the time the men running with the wagon over the debris. Around me there were shouts of laughter and disapproval. Somebody better stop them fools, Schofield said in outrage. That's what I call taking things too far. Goddamn, how the hell they going to get her down from there after she gets full of beer? Somebody answer me that. How they going to get her down? Round here throwing away all that good milk. The big woman left me unnerved. Milk and beer, I felt sad, watching the wagon careen dangerously as they went around a corner. We went on, avoiding the broken bottles as now the spilling kerosene splashed into the pale spilt milk. How much has happened? Why was I torn? We moved around a corner. My head still ached. Schofield touched my arm. Here we is, he said. We had come to a huge tenement building. Where are we? I said. This the place where most of us live, he said. Come on. So that was it, the meaning of the kerosene. I couldn't believe it, couldn't believe they had the nerve. All the windows seemed empty. They'd blacked it out themselves. I saw now only by flash or flame. Where will you live? I said, looking up. You call this living? Schofield said. It's the only way to get rid of it, man. I looked for hesitation in their vague forms. They stood looking at the building rising above us, the liquid dark of the oil simmering dully in the stray flecks of light that struck their pails, bent forward, their shoulders bowed. None said no, by word or stance. And in the dark windows and on the roofs above I could now discern the forms of women and children. Dupre moved toward the building. Now look, y'all, he said, his triple-hatted head showing grotesquely atop the stoop. I wants all the women and chillun and the old and the sick folks brought out. And when you takes your buckets up the stairs, I wants you to go clean to the top. I mean the top. And when you get there, I want you to start using your flashlights in every room to make sure nobody gets left behind. Then when you get 'em out, start splashing coal oil. Then when you get it splashed, I'm going to holler, and when I holler 3 times, I want you to light them matches and get. After that, it's every tub on its own black bottom. It didn't occur to me to interfere, or to question. They had a plan. Already I could see the women and children coming down the steps. A child was crying. And suddenly everyone paused, turning, looking off into the dark. Somewhere nearby an incongruous sound shook the dark, an air hammer pounding like a machine gun. They paused with the sensitivity of grazing deer, then returned to their work, the women and children once more moving. "That's right, y'all. You ladies move on up the street to the folks you going to stay with," Dupree said. "And keep holt them kids." Someone pounded my back and I swung around, seeing a woman push past me and climb up to catch Dupree's arm, their 2 figures seeming to blend as her voice arose, thin, vibrant and desperate. "Please, Dupree," she said, "please. You know my time's almost here. You know it is. If you do it now, where am I going to go?" Dupree pulled away and rose to a higher step. He looked down at her, shaking his thrice-hatted head. "Now get on out the way, Lottie," he said patiently. "Why you have to start this now? We done been all over it, and you know I ain't goin' change. And listen here, the rest of y'all," he said, reaching into the top of his hip boot and producing a nickel-plated revolver and waving it around, "don't think they's going to be any mind-changing either. And I don't aim for no arguments neither. You goddamn right, Dupree. We with you. My kid died from the TBs in that death trap, but I bet a man ain't no more goin' be born in there," he said. "So now, Lottie, you go on up the street and let us men's get going." She stood back, crying. I looked at her, in house shoes, her breasts turgid, her belly heavy and high. In the crowd, women's hands took her away, her large liquid eyes turned for a second toward the man in the rubber boots. What type of man is he? What would Jack say of him? Jack. Jack. And where was he in this? "Let's go, buddy," Schofield said, nudging me. I followed him, filled with a sense of Jack's outrageous unreality. We went in, up the stairs, flashing our lights. Ahead I saw Dupree moving. He was a type of man nothing in my life had taught me to see, to understand, or respect, a man outside the scheme till now. We entered rooms littered with the signs of swift emptying. It was hot, close. "This here's my own apartment," Schofield said. "And ain't the bedbugs going to get a surprise?" We slopped the kerosene about, upon an old mattress, along the floor, then moved into the hall, using the flashlights. From all through the building came the sounds of footsteps, of splashing oil, the occasional prayerful protest of some old one being forced to leave. The men worked in silence now, like moles deep in the earth. Time seemed to hold. No one laughed. Then from below came Dupree's voice. "Okay, men's. We got everybody out. Now starting with the top floor, I want you to start striking matches. Be careful and don't set yourself on fire." There was still some kerosene left in Schofield's bucket and I saw him pick up a rag and drop it in, then came the sputtering of a match and I saw the room leap to flame. The heat flared up and I backed away. He stood there silhouetted against the red flare, looking into the flames, shouting. "God damn you rotten son savages. You didn't think I'd do it, but there it is. You wouldn't fix it up. Now see how you like it. Let's go," I said. Below us, men shot downstairs 5 and 6 steps at a time, moving in the weird light of flash and flame in long, dream bounds. On each floor as I passed, smoke and flame arose. And now I was seized with a fierce sense of exaltation. They've done it, I thought. They organized it and carried it through alone, the decision their own and their own action. Capable of their own action. There came a thunder of footfalls above me, someone calling, "Keep going man, it's hell upstairs." Somebody done opened the door to the roof and them flames is leaping. Come on, Schofield said. I moved, feeling something slip, and was halfway down the next flight before realizing that my briefcase was gone. For a second I hesitated, but I'd had it too long to leave it now. Come on, buddy, Schofield called, we can't be fooling around. In a second, I said. Men were shooting past. I bent over, holding on to the handrail, and shouldered my way back up the stairs, using my flash along each step, back slowly, finding it, an oily footstep embedded with crushed pieces of plaster showing upon its leather side, getting it now and turning to bound down again. The oil won't come off easily, I thought with a pang. But this was it, what I had known was coming around the dark corner of my mind, had known and tried to tell the committee, and which they had ignored. I plunged down, shaking with fierce excitement. At the landing I saw a bucket half full of kerosene and seized it, flinging it impulsively into a burning room. A huge puff of smoke-fringed flame filled the doorway, licking outward toward me. I ran, choking and coughing as I plunged. They did it themselves, I thought, holding my breath, planned it, organized it, applied the flame. I burst into the air and the exploding sounds of the night, and I did not know if the voice was that of a man, woman or child, but for a moment I stood on the stoop with the red doorway behind me and heard the voice call me by my brotherhood name. It was as though I had been aroused from sleep, and for an instant I stood there looking, listening to the voice, almost lost in the clamor of shouts, screams, burglar alarms and sirens. "Brother, ain't it wonderful?" it called. "You said you would lead us, you really said it." I went down into the street, going slowly but filled with a feverish inner need to be away from that voice. Where had Schofield gone? Most of their eyes, white in the flame-flushed dark, looked toward the building. But now I heard someone say, "Woman, who you say that is?" And she proudly repeated my name. "Where he go? Get him, man, Ras want him." I went into the crowd, walking slowly, smoothly into the dark crowd, the whole surface of my skin alert, my back chilled, looking, listening to those moving with a heaving and sweating and a burr of talk around me, and aware that now that I wanted to see them, needed to see them, I could not, feeling them, a dark mass in motion on a dark night, a black river ripping through a black land, and Ras or Tarp could move beside me and I wouldn't know. I was one with the mass, moving down the littered street over the puddles of oil and milk, my personality blasted. Then I was in the next block, dodging in and out, hearing them somewhere in the crowd behind me, moving on through the sound of sirens and burglar alarms to be swept into a swifter crowd and pushed along, half running, half walking, trying to see behind me and wondering where the others had gone. There was shooting back there now, and on either side of me they were throwing garbage cans, bricks and pieces of metal into plate glass windows. I moved, feeling as though a huge force was on the point of bursting. Shouldering my way to the side, I stood in a doorway and watched them move, feeling a certain vindication as now I thought of the message that had brought me here. Who had called? One of the district members or someone from Jack's birthday celebration? Who wanted me at the district after it was too late? Very well, I'd go there now. I'd see what the masterminds thought now. Where were they anyway, and what profound conclusions were they drawing? What ex post facto lessons of history? And that crash over the telephone, had that been the beginning, or had Jack simply dropped his eye? I laughed drunkenly, the eruption paining my head. Suddenly the shooting ceased, and in the silence there was the sound of voices, footfalls, labor. "Hey, buddy," somebody said beside me, "where you going?" It was Schofield. "It's either run or get knocked down," I said. "I thought you were still back there." I cut out, "Man." A building 2 doors away started to burn and they had to get the fire department. Damn. Wasn't for this noise I'd swear those bullets was mosquitoes. "Watch out," I warned, pulling him away from where a man lay propped against a post, tightening a tourniquet around his gashed arm. Schofield flashed his light and for a second I saw the black man, his face gray with shock, watching the jetting pulsing of his blood spurting into the street. Then, compelled, I reached down and twisted the tourniquet, feeling the blood warm upon my hand, seeing the pulsing cease. "You done stopped it," a young man said, looking down. "Here," I said, "you take it, hold it tight. Get him to a doctor." "Ain't you a doctor?" "Me?" I said. "Me? Are you crazy? If you want him to live, get him away from here." "Albert done gone for one," the boy said. "But I thought you was one." "You?" "No," I said, looking at my bloody hands, "no, not me. You hold it tight until the doctor comes. I couldn't cure a headache." I stood wiping my hands against the briefcase, looking down at the big man, his back resting against the post with his eyes closed, the boy holding desperately to the tourniquet made of what had been a bright new tie. "Come on," I said. "Say," Schofield said when we were past, "wasn't that you that woman was calling brother back yonder?" "Brother? No, it must have been some other guy. You know, man, I think I seen you before somewhere. You ever was in Memphis?" "Say, look what's coming," he said, pointing, and I looked through the dark to see a squad of white-helmeted policemen charge forward and break for shelter as a rain of bricks showered down from the building tops. Some of the white helmets, racing for the doorways, turned to fire, and I heard Schofield grunt and go down, and I dropped beside him, seeing the red burst of fire and hearing the shrill scream, like an arching dive, curving from above to end in a crunching thud in the street. It was as though it landed in my stomach, sickening me, and I crouched, looking down past Schofield, who lay just ahead of me, to see the dark crushed form from the roof, and farther away, the body of a cop, his helmet making a small white luminous mound in the dark. I moved now to see whether Schofield was hit, just as he squirmed around and cursed at the cops who were trying to rescue the one who was down, his voice furious, as he stretched full length firing away with a nickel-plated pistol like that Dupree had waved. "Get the hell down, man," he yelled over his shoulder. "I been wanting to blast him a long time." "No, not with that thing," I said. "Let's get out of here." "Hell, man, I can shoot this thing," he said. I rolled behind a pile of baskets filled with rotting chickens now, and to my left, upon the littered curb, a woman and man crouched behind an upturned delivery cart. "Dart," she said, "let's get up on the hill, Dart. Up with the respectable people." "Hill, hell. We stay right here," the man said. "This thing's just starting. If it becomes a shown-off race riot, I want to be here where there'll be some fighting back." The words struck like bullets fired close range, blasting my satisfaction to earth. It was as though the uttered word had given meaning to the night, almost as though it had created it, brought it into being in the instant his breath vibrated small against the loud, riotous air. And in defining, in giving organization to the fury, it seemed to spin me around, and in my mind I was looking backward over the days since Clifton's death. Could this be the answer? Could this be what the committee had planned, the answer to why they'd surrendered our influence to Ras? Suddenly I heard the hoarse explosion of a shotgun, and looked past Schofield's glinting pistol to the huddled form from the roof. It was suicide, without guns it was suicide, and not even the pawnshops here had guns for sale, and yet I knew with a shattering dread that the uproar which for the moment marked primarily the crash of men against things, against stores, markets, could swiftly become the crash of men against men, and with most of the guns and numbers on the other side. I could see it now, see it clearly and in growing magnitude. It was not suicide, but murder. The committee had planned it. And I had helped, had been a tool. A tool just at the very moment I had thought myself free. By pretending to agree I had indeed agreed, had made myself responsible for that huddled form lighted by flame and gunfire in the street, and all the others whom now the night was making ripe for death. The briefcase swung heavy against my leg as I ran, going away, leaving Schofield cursing his lack of bullets behind me, running wildly and swinging the briefcase hard against the head of a dog that leaped at me out of the crowd, sending him yelping away. To my right lay a quiet residential street with trees, and I entered it, going toward 7th Avenue, toward the district, filled now with horror and hatred. They'll pay, I thought. They'll pay. The street lay dead quiet in the light of the lately risen moon, the gunfire thin and for a moment, distant. The rioting seemed in another world. For a moment I paused beneath a low, thickly leaved tree, looking down the well-kept doily shadowed walks past the silent houses. It was as though the tenants had vanished, leaving the houses silent with all windows shaded, refugees from a rising flood. Then I heard the single footfalls coming doggedly toward me in the night, an eerie slapping sound followed by a precise and hallucinated cry, time's flying souls dying, the coming of the Lord draweth nigh, as though he had run for days, for years. He trotted past where I stood beneath the tree, his bare feet slapping the walk in the silence, going for a few feet and then the high, hallucinated cry beginning again. I ran into the avenue where in the light of a flaming liquor store I saw 3 old women scurrying toward me with raised skirts loaded with canned goods. "I can't stop it just yet, but have mercy, Lord," one of them said. "Do, Jesus, do, sweet Jesus." I moved ahead, the fumes of alcohol and burning tar in my nostrils. Down the avenue to my left a single street lamp still glowed where the long block was intersected on my right by a street, and I could see a crowd rushing a store that faced the intersection, moving in, and a fusillade of canned goods, salami, liverwurst, hogsheads and chitterlings belching out to those outside and a bag of flour bursting white upon them, as now out of the dark of the intersecting street 2 mounted policemen came at a gallop, heaving huge and heavy-hooved, charging straight into the swarming mass. And I could see the great forward lunge of the horses and the crowd breaking and rolling back like a wave, back, and screaming and cursing, and some laughing, back and around and out into the avenue, stumbling and pushing, as the horses, heads high and bits froth-flecked, went over the curb to land stiff-legged and slide over the cleared walk as upon ice skates and passed, carried by the force of the charge, sideways now, legs stiff, sparks flying, to where another crowd looted another store. And my heart tightened as the first crowd swung imperturbably back to their looting with derisive cries, like sandpipers swinging around to glean the shore after a furious wave's recession. Cursing Jack and the Brotherhood, I moved around a steel grill torn from the front of a pawnshop, seeing the troopers galloping back and the riders lifting the horses to charge again, grim and skillful in white steel helmets, and the charge beginning. This time a man went down and I saw a woman swinging a gleaming frying pan hard against the horse's rump and the horse neighing and beginning to plunge. "They'll pay," I thought, "they'll pay." They came toward me as I ran, a crowd of men and women carrying cases of beer, cheese, chains of linked sausage, watermelons, sacks of sugar, hams, cornmeal, fuel lamps. If only it could stop right here, here before the others came with their guns. I ran. There was no firing. But when, I thought, how long before it starts? "Get a side of bacon, Joe," a woman called. "Get a side of bacon, Joe, get Wilson's." "Lord, Lord, Lord," a dark voice called from the dark. I went on, plunged in a sense of painful isolation as I reached 125th Street and started east. A squad of mounted police galloped past. Men with submachine guns were guarding a bank and a large jewelry store. I moved out to the center of the street, running down the trolley rails. The moon was high now and before me the shattered glass glittered in the street like the water of a flooded river upon the surface of which I ran as in a dream, avoiding by fate alone the distorted objects washed away by the flood. Then suddenly I seemed to sink, sucked under. Ahead of me the body hung, white, naked, and horribly feminine from a lamp-post. I felt myself spin around with horror and it was as though I had turned some nightmarish somersault. I whirled, still moving by reflex, backtracking and stopped, and now there was another and another, 7 all hanging before a gutted storefront. I stumbled, hearing the cracking of bones underfoot, and saw a physician's skeleton shattered on the street, the skull rolling away from the backbone, as I studied long enough to notice the unnatural stiffness of those hanging above me. They were mannequins, dummies. I said aloud. Hairless, bald and sterilely feminine. And I recalled the boys in the blonde wigs, expecting the relief of laughter, but suddenly was more devastated by the humor than by the horror. But are they unreal? I thought, are they? What if one, even one is real, is Sybil? I hugged my briefcase, backing away, and ran. They moved in a tight-knit order, carrying sticks and clubs, shotguns and rifles, led by Ras the Exhorter become Ras the Destroyer upon a great black horse. A new Ras of a haughty, vulgar dignity, dressed in the costume of an Abyssinian chieftain, a fur cap upon his head, his arm bearing a shield, a cape made of the skin of some wild animal around his shoulders. A figure more out of a dream than out of Harlem, than out of even this Harlem night, yet real, alive, alarming. "Come away from that stupid looting," he called to a group before a store. "Come join with us to burst in the armory and get guns and ammunition." And hearing his voice, I opened my briefcase and searched for my dark glasses, my Reinhardts, drawing them out only to see the crushed lenses fall to the street. Reinhardt, I thought, Reinhardt. I turned. The police were back there behind me. If shooting started, I'd be caught in the crossfire. I felt in my briefcase, feeling papers, shattered iron, coins, my fingers closing over Tarp's lead chain, and I slipped it over my knuckles, trying to think. I closed the flap, locking it. A new mood was settling over me as they came on, a larger crowd than Ras had ever drawn. I went calmly forward, holding the heavy case but moving with a certain new sense of self, and with it a feeling almost of relief, almost of a sigh. I knew suddenly what I had to do, knew it even before it shaped itself completely in my mind. Someone called, "Look!" And Ras bent down from the horse, saw me and flung, of all things, a spear, and I fell forward at the movement of his arm, catching myself upon my hands as a tumbler would, and heard the shock of it piercing one of the hanging dummies. I stood, my briefcase coming with me. "Betrayer!" Ras shouted. "It's the brother," someone said. They moved up around the horse, excited and not quite decided, and I faced him, knowing I was no worse than he, nor any better, and that all the months of illusion and the night of chaos required but a few simple words, a mild, even a meek, muted action to clear the air. To awaken them and me. "I am no longer their brother," I shouted. "They want a race riot and I am against it. The more of us who are killed, the better they like." "Ignore his lying tongue," Ras shouted. "Hang him up to teach the black people a lesson, and there be no more traitors. No more Uncle Toms. Hang him up there with them blast-head dummies." "But anyone can see it," I shouted. "It's true, I was betrayed by those who I thought were our friends, but they counted on this man, too. They needed this destroyer to do their work. They deserted you so that in your despair you'd follow this man to your destruction. Can't you see it? They want you guilty of your own murder, your own sacrifice. Grab him!" Ras shouted. 3 men stepped forward and I reached up without thinking, actually a desperate oratorical gesture of disagreement and defiance, as I shouted, "No!" But my hand struck the spear and I wrenched it free, gripping it mid-shaft, point forward. "They want this to happen," I said. "They planned it. They want the mobs to come uptown with machine guns and rifles. They want the streets to flow with blood, your blood, black blood and white blood, so that they can turn your death and sorrow and defeat into propaganda. It's simple, you've known it a long time. It goes, use a nigger to catch a nigger. Well, they used me to catch you and now they're using Ras to do away with me and to prepare your sacrifice. Don't you see it? Isn't it clear? Hang the lying traitor," Ras shouted. "What are you waiting for?" I saw a group of men start forward. "Wait," I said. "Then kill me for myself, for my own mistake, then leave it there. Don't kill me for those who are downtown laughing at the trick they played." But even as I spoke I knew it was no good. I had no words and no eloquence, and when Ras thundered, "Hang him!" I stood there facing them, and it seemed unreal. I faced them knowing that the madman in a foreign costume was real and yet unreal, knowing that he wanted my life, that he held me responsible for all the nights and days and all the suffering and for all that which I was incapable of controlling, and I no hero, but short and dark with only a certain eloquence and a bottomless capacity for being a fool to mark me from the rest, saw them, recognized them at last as those whom I had failed and of whom I was now, just now, a leader, though leading them, running ahead of them, only in the stripping away of my illusionment. I looked at Ras on his horse and at their handful of guns and recognized the absurdity of the whole night and of the simple yet confoundingly complex arrangement of hope and desire, fear and hate, that had brought me here still running, and knowing now who I was and where I was, and knowing too that I had no longer to run for or from the Jacks and the Emersons and the Bledsoes and Nortons, but only from their confusion, impatience, and refusal to recognize the beautiful absurdity of their American identity and mine. I stood there, knowing that by dying, that by being hanged by Ras on this street in this destructive night I would perhaps move them one fraction of a bloody step closer to a definition of who they were and of what I was and had been. But the definition would have been too narrow. I was invisible, and hanging would not bring me to visibility, even to their eyes, since they wanted my death not for myself alone but for the chase I'd been on all my life, because of the way I'd been run, chased, operated, purged, although to a great extent I could have done nothing else, given their blindness. Didn't they tolerate both Reinhardt and Bledsoe? And my invisibility? And that I, a little black man with an assumed name, should die because a big black man in his hatred and confusion over the nature of a reality that seemed controlled solely by white men whom I knew to be as blind as he, was just too much, too outrageously absurd. And I knew that it was better to live out one's own absurdity than to die for that of others, whether for Ras's or Jack's. So when Ras yelled, "Hang him!" I let fly the spear, and it was as though for a moment I had surrendered my life and begun to live again, watching it catch him as he turned his head to shout, ripping through both cheeks, and saw the surprised pause of the crowd as Ras wrestled with the spear that locked his jaws. Some of the men raised their guns, but they were too close to shoot, and I hit the first with Tarp's leg chain and the other in the middle with my briefcase, then ran through a looted store, hearing the bellowing of the burglar alarm as I scrambled over scattered shoes, upturned showcases, chairs, back to where I saw the moonlight through the rear door ahead. They came behind me like a draft of flames, and I led them through and around to the avenue, and if they'd fired they could have had me, but it was important to them that they hang me, lynch me even, since that was the way they ran, had been taught to run. I should die by hanging alone, as though only hanging would settle things, even the score. So I ran expecting death between the shoulder blades or through the back of my head, and as I ran I was trying to get to Mary's. It was not a decision of thought but something I realized suddenly while running over puddles of milk in the black street, stopping to swing the heavy briefcase and the leg chain, slipping and sliding out of their hands. If only I could turn around and drop my arms and say, "Look, men, give me a break, we're all black folks together. Nobody cares." Though now I knew we cared, they at last cared enough to act, so I thought. If only I could say, "Look, they've played a trick on us, the same old trick with new variations. Let's stop running and respect and love one another." If only, I thought, running into another crowd now and thinking I'd gotten away, only to catch a punch on my jaw as one closed in shouting, and feeling the leg chain bounce as I caught his head and spurted forward, turning out of the avenue only to be struck by a spray of water that seemed to descend from above. It was a main that had burst, throwing a fierce curtain of spray into the night. I was going for Mary's, but I was moving downtown through the dripping street rather than up, and, as I started through, a mounted policeman charged through the spray, the horse black and dripping, charging through and looming huge and unreal, neighing and clopping across the pavement upon me now as I slipped to my knees and saw the huge pulsing bulk floating down upon and over me, the sound of hooves and screams and a rush of water coming through distantly as though I sat remote in a padded room, then over, almost past, the hair of the tail a fiery lash across my eyes. I stumbled about in circles, blindly swinging the briefcase, the image of a fiery comet's tail burning my smarting lids, turning and swinging blindly with briefcase and leg chain and hearing the gallop begin as I floundered helplessly, and now moving straight into the full, naked force of the water, feeling its power like a blow, wet and thudding and cold, then through it and able partly to see just as another horse dashed up and through, a hunter taking a barrier, the rider slanting backward, the horse rising, then hit and swallowed by the rising spray. I stumbled down the street, the comet tail in my eyes, seeing a little better now and looking back to see the water spraying like a mad geyser in the moonlight. To marry, I thought, to marry. There were rows of iron fences backed by low hedges before the houses and I stumbled behind them and lay panting to rest from the crushing force of the water. But hardly had I settled down, the dry, dog-day smell of the hedge in my nose, when they stopped before the house, leaning upon the fence. They were passing a bottle around and their voices sounded spent of strong emotion. "This is some night," one of them said. "Ain't this some night? It's 'bout like the rest." "Why you say that?" "'Cause it's full of fucking and fighting and drinking and lying, gimme that bottle." "Yeah, but tonight I seen some things I never seen before." "You think you seen something? Hell, you ought to been over on Lenox about 2 hours ago. You know that Studras the Destroyer? Well, man, he was spitting blood. That crazy guy? Hell, yes, man, he had him a big black hoss and a fur cap and some kind of old lion skin or something over his shoulders and he was raising hell. Goddamn if he wasn't a sight, riding up and down on this ole hoss, you know, one of the kind that pulls vegetable wagons, and he got him a cowboy saddle and some big spurs. Oh nah, man. Hell, yes. Riding up and down the block yelling, destroy 'em. Drive 'em out. Burn 'em out. I, Ras, commands you. You get that, man, he said, I, Ras, commands you, to destroy them to the last piece of rotten fish. And 'bout that time some joker with a big ole Georgia voice sticks his head out the window and yells, ride 'em, cowboy. Give 'em hell and bananas. And man, that crazy son of a bitch up there on that hoss looking like death eating a sandwich, he reaches down and comes up with a 45 and starts blazing up at that window, and man, talk about cutting out. In a second wasn't nobody left but ole Raz up there on that hoss with that lion skin stretched straight out behind him. Crazy, man. Everybody else trying to get some loot and him and his boys out for blood. I lay like a man rescued from drowning, listening, still not sure I was alive. I was over there, another voice said. You see him when the mounted police got after his ass? Hell, nah. Here, take a little taste. Well, that's when you shoulda seen him. When he seen them cops riding up, he reached back of his saddle and come up with some kind of old shield. A shield? Hell, yes. One with a spike in the middle of it. And that ain't all. When he sees the cops, he calls to one of his goddamn henchmen to hand him up a spear, and a little short guy run out into the street and give him one. You know, one of the kind you see them African guys carrying in the moving pictures. Where the hell was you, man? Me? I'm over on the side where some stud done broke in a store and is selling cold beer out the window, done gone into business, man, the voice laughed. I was drinking me some Budweiser and digging the doings, when here comes the cops up the street, riding like cowboys, man, and when ole Ras the what's-his-name sees 'em, he lets out a roar like a lion and rears way back and starts shooting spurs into that boss's ass fast as nickels falling in the subway at going home time, and goddamn. That's when you ought to seen him. Say, gimme a taste there, fella. Thanks. Here he comes bookety with that spear stuck out in front of him and that shield on his arm, charging, man. And he's yelling something in African or West Indian or something, and he's got his head down low like he knew about that shit too, man, riding like Earl Sand in the Fifth at Jamaica. That LA black hoss let out a whinny and got his head down. I don't know where he got that son of a bitch, but, gentlemens, I swear. When he felt that steel in his high behind, he came on like man o' war going to get his ashes hauled. Before the cops knowed what hit 'em, Ras is right in the middle of 'em, and one cop grabbed for that spear, and ole Ras swung round and bust him across the head, and the cop goes down and his hoss rears up, and ole Ras tries to spear him another cop, and the other hosses is plunging around, and ole Ras tries to spear him still another cop, only he's too close and the hoss is pooling and snorting and pissing and shitting. And they swings around and the cop is swinging his pistol, and every time he swings ole Ras throws up his shield with one arm and chops at him with the spear with the other, and man, you could hear that gun striking that ole shield like somebody dropping tire irons out a 12-story window. And you know what, when ole Ras saw he was too close to spear him, the cop he wheeled that hoss around and rode off a bit and did him a quick roundabout face and charged him again, out for blood, man. Only this time the cops got tired of that bullshit and one of 'em started shooting. And that was the lick. Ole Ras didn't have time to get his gun, so he let fly with that spear, and you could hear him grunt and say something about that cops ken folks, and then him and that hoss shot up the street leaping like hi-yo, the goddamn silver. Man, where'd you come from? It's the truth, man, here's my right hand. They were laughing outside the hedge and leaving, and I lay in a cramp, wanting to laugh and yet knowing that Ras was not funny, or not only funny, but dangerous as well, wrong but justified, crazy and yet coldly sane. Why did they make it seem funny, only funny? I thought. And yet knowing that it was. It was funny and dangerous and sad. Jack had seen it, or had stumbled upon it and used it to prepare a sacrifice. And I had been used as a tool. My grandfather had been wrong about yesing them to death and destruction, or else things had changed too much since his day. There was only one way to destroy them. I got up from behind the hedge in the waning moon, wet and shaken in the hot air, and started out looking for Jack, still turned around in my direction. I moved into the street, listening to the distant sounds of the riot and seeing in my mind the image of two eyes in the bottom of a shattered glass. I kept to the darker side of streets and to the silent areas, thinking that if he wished really to hide his strategy he'd appear in the district, with a sound truck perhaps, playing the friendly advisor with Restrom and Tubbett beside him. They were in civilian clothes, and I thought, cops, until I saw the baseball bat and started to turn, hearing, "Hey, you." I hesitated. "What's in that briefcase?" they said. And if they'd asked me anything else I might have stood still. But at the question a wave of shame and outrage shook me and I ran, still heading for Jack. But I was in strange territory now, and someone, for some reason, had removed the manhole cover, and I felt myself plunge down, a long drop that ended upon a load of coal that sent up a cloud of dust, and I lay in the black dark upon the black coal, no longer running, hiding or concerned, hearing the shifting of the coal, as from somewhere above their voices came floating down. "You see the way he went down, Zoom. I was just fixing to slug the bastard." "You hit him?" "I don't know. Say, Joe, you think the bastard's dead?" "Maybe. He sure is in the dark though. You can't even see his eyes." "Nigger in the coal pile, eh, Joe?" Someone hollered down the hole, "Hey, black boy. Come on out. We want to see what's in that briefcase." "Come down and get me," I said. "What's in that briefcase?" "You," I said, suddenly laughing. "What do you think of that?" "Me?" "All of you," I said. "You're crazy," he said. "But I still have you in this briefcase." "What'd you steal?" "Can't you see?" I said. "Light a match." "What the hell's he talking about, Joe?" "Strike a match. The boogie's nuts." High above I saw the small flames sputter into light. They stood heads down, as in prayer, unable to see me back in the coal. "Come on down," I said. "Ha. I've had you in my briefcase all the time and you didn't know me then and can't see me now. You son of a bitch." One of them called, outraged. Then the match went out and I heard something fall softly upon the coal nearby. They were talking above. "You goddamn black nigger son of a bitch," someone called, "see how you like this," and I heard the cover settle over the manhole with a dull clang. Fine bits of dirt showered down as they stamped upon the lid, and for a moment I sent Cole sliding in wild surprise, looking up through black space to where for a second the dim light of a match sank through a circle of holes in the steel. Then I thought, this is the way it's always been, only now I know it, and rested back, calm now, placing the briefcase beneath my head. I could open it in the morning, push off the lid. Now I was tired, too tired, my mind retreating, the image of the two glass eyes running together like blobs of melting lead. Here it was as though the riot was gone, and I felt the tug of sleep seemed to move out upon black water. It's a kind of death without hanging, I thought, a death alive. In the morning I'll remove the lid. Mary, I should have gone to Mary's. I would go now to Mary's in the only way that I could. I moved off over the black water, floating, sighing, sleeping invisibly. But I was never to reach Mary's, and I was over-optimistic about removing the steel cap in the morning. Great invisible waves of time flowed over me, but that morning never came. There was no morning nor light of any kind to awaken me, and I slept on until finally I was aroused by hunger. Then I was up in the dark and blundering around, feeling rough walls and the coal giving way beneath each step like treacherous sand. I tried to reach above me but found only space, unbroken and impenetrable. Then I tried to find the usual ladder that leads out of such holes, but there was none. I had to have a light, and now on hands and knees, holding tight to my briefcase, I searched the coal until I found the folder of matches the men had dropped. How long ago had that been? But there were only 3, and to save them I started searching for paper to make a torch, feeling about slowly over the coal pile. I needed just one piece of paper to light my way out of the hole, but there was nothing. Next I searched my pockets, finding not even a bill, or an advertising folder, or a Brotherhood leaflet. Why had I destroyed Reinhardt's throwaway? Well, there was only one thing to do if I was to make a torch. I'd have to open my briefcase. In it were the only papers I had. I started with my high school diploma, applying one precious match with a feeling of remote irony, even smiling as I saw the swift but feeble light push back the gloom. I was in a deep basement, full of shapeless objects that extended farther than I could see, and I realized that to light my way out I would have to burn every paper in the briefcase. I moved slowly off, toward the darker blackness, lighting my way by these feeble torches. The next to go was Clifton's doll, but it burned so stubbornly that I reached inside the case for something else. Then by the light of the smoke-sputtering doll I opened a folded page. It was the anonymous letter, which burned so quickly that as it flamed I hurriedly unfolded another. It was that slip upon which Jack had written my Brotherhood name. I could still smell Emma's perfume even in the dampness of the cellar. And now, seeing the handwriting of the two in the consuming flames, I burned my hand and slipped to my knees, staring. The handwriting was the same. I knelt there, stunned, watching the flames consume them. That he, or anyone at that late date, could have named me and set me running with one and the same stroke of the pen was too much. Suddenly I began to scream, getting up in the darkness and plunging wildly about, bumping against walls, scattering coal, and in my anger extinguishing my feeble light. But still whirling on in the blackness, knocking against the rough walls of a narrow passage, banging my head and cursing, I stumbled down and plunged against some kind of partition and sailed headlong, coughing and sneezing, into another dimensionless room, where I continued to roll about the floor in my outrage. How long this kept up, I do not know. It might have been days, weeks. I lost all sense of time. And every time I paused to rest, the outrage revived and I went off again. Then, finally, when I could barely move, something seemed to say, "That's enough, don't kill yourself. You've run enough, you're through with them at last," and I collapsed, face forward, and lay there beyond the point of exhaustion, too tired to close my eyes. It was a state neither of dreaming nor of waking, but somewhere in between, in which I was caught like True Blood's jaybird that Yellow Jackets had paralyzed in every part but his eyes. But somehow the floor had now turned to sand and the darkness to light, and I lay the prisoner of a group consisting of Jack and old Emerson and Bledsoe and Norton and Rass and the school superintendent and a number of others whom I failed to recognize, but all of whom had run me, who now pressed around me as I lay beside a river of black water, near where an armored bridge arched sharply away to where I could not see. And I was protesting their holding me, and they were demanding that I return to them and were annoyed with my refusal. "No," I said. "I'm through with all your illusions and lies, I'm through running." "Not quite," Jack said above the others' angry demands, "but you soon will be, unless you return. Refuse and we'll free you of your illusions, all right." "No, thank you, I'll free myself," I said, struggling to rise from the cutting sand. But now they came forward with a knife, holding me, and I felt the bright red pain, and they took the two bloody blobs and cast them over the bridge, and out of my anguish I saw them curve up and catch beneath the apex of the curving arch of the bridge, to hang there, dripping down through the sunlight into the dark red water. And while the others laughed, before my pain-sharpened eyes the whole world was slowly turning red. "Now you're free of illusions," Jack said, pointing to my seed wasting upon the air. "How does it feel to be free of one's illusions?" And I looked up through a pain so intense now that the air seemed to roar with the clanging of metal, hearing, "How does it feel to be free of illusion?" And now I answered, painful and empty, as I saw a glittering butterfly circle 3 times around my blood-red parts, up there beneath the bridge's high arch. "But look," I said, pointing. And they looked and laughed, and suddenly seeing their satisfied faces and understanding, I gave a Bledsoe laugh, startling them. And Jack came forward, curious. "Why do you laugh?" he said. "Because at a price I now see that which I couldn't see," I said. "What does he think he sees?" they said. And Jack came closer, threatening, and I laughed. "I'm not afraid now," I said. "But if you'll look, you'll see. It's not invisible." "See what?" they said. "That there hang not only my generations wasting upon the water," and now the pain welled up and I could no longer see them. "But what?" "Go on," they said. "But your sun." "Yes? And your moon." "He's crazy." "Your world." I knew he was a mystic idealist. Tabat said. "Still," I said, "there's your universe, and that drip-drop upon the water you hear is all the history you've made, all you're going to make. Now laugh, you scientists. Let's hear you laugh." And high above me now the bridge seemed to move off to where I could not see, striding like a robot, an Iron Man, whose iron legs clanged doomfully as it moved. And then I struggled up, full of sorrow and pain, shouting, "No, no, we must stop him." And I awoke in the blackness. Fully awake now, I simply lay there as though paralyzed. I could think of nothing else to do. Later I would try to find my way out, but now I could only lie on the floor, reliving the dream. All their faces were so vivid that they seemed to stand before me beneath a spotlight. They were all up there somewhere, making a mess of the world. Well, let them. I was through and, in spite of the dream, I was whole. And now I realized that I couldn't return to Mary's, or to any part of my old life. I could approach it only from the outside, and I had been as invisible to Mary as I had been to the Brotherhood. No, I couldn't return to Mary's, or to the campus, or to the Brotherhood, or home. I could only move ahead or stay here, underground. So I would stay here until I was chased out. Here, at least, I could try to think things out in peace, or, if not in peace, in quiet. I would take up residence underground. The end was in the beginning. Epilogue. So there you have all of it that's important. Or at least you almost have it. I'm an invisible man and it placed me in a hole, or showed me the hole I was in, if you will, and I reluctantly accepted the fact. What else could I have done? Once you get used to it, reality is as irresistible as a club, and I was clubbed into the cellar before I caught the hint. Perhaps that's the way it had to be, I don't know. Nor do I know whether accepting the lesson has placed me in the rear or in the avant-garde. That, perhaps, is a lesson for history, and I'll leave such decisions to Jack and his ilk while I try belatedly to study the lesson of my own life. Let me be honest with you, a feat which, by the way, I find of the utmost difficulty. When one is invisible he finds such problems as good and evil, honesty and dishonesty, of such shifting shapes that he confuses one with the other, depending upon who happens to be looking through him at the time. Well, now I've been trying to look through myself, and there's a risk in it. I was never more hated than when I tried to be honest. Or when, even as just now, I've tried to articulate exactly what I felt to be the truth. No one was satisfied, not even I. On the other hand, I've never been more loved and appreciated than when I tried to justify and affirm someone's mistaken beliefs, or when I've tried to give my friends the incorrect, absurd answers they wished to hear. In my presence they could talk and agree with themselves, the world was nailed down, and they loved it. They received a feeling of security. But here was the rub: too often, in order to justify them, I had to take myself by the throat and choke myself until my eyes bulged and my tongue hung out and wagged like the door of an empty house in a high wind. Oh, yes, it made them happy and it made me sick. So I became ill of affirmation, of saying yes against the naysaying of my stomach, not to mention my brain. There is, by the way, an area in which a man's feelings are more rational than his mind, and it is precisely in that area that his will is pulled in several directions at the same time. You might sneer at this, but I know now. I was pulled this way and that for longer than I can remember. And my problem was that I always tried to go in everyone's way but my own. I have also been called one thing and then another while no one really wished to hear what I called myself. So after years of trying to adopt the opinions of others I finally rebelled. I am an invisible man. Thus I have come a long way and returned and boomeranged a long way from the point in society toward which I originally aspired. So I took to the cellar, I hibernated. I got away from it all. But that wasn't enough. I couldn't be still even in hibernation. Because, damn it, there's the mind, the mind. It wouldn't let me rest. Gin, jazz and dreams were not enough. Books were not enough. My belated appreciation of the crude joke that had kept me running was not enough. And my mind revolved again and again back to my grandfather. And, despite the farce that ended my attempt to say yes to the Brotherhood, I'm still plagued by his deathbed advice. Perhaps he hid his meaning deeper than I thought, perhaps his anger threw me off, I can't decide. Could he have meant, hell, he must have meant the principle, that we were to affirm the principle on which the country was built and not the men, or at least not the men who did the violence. Did he mean say yes because he knew that the principle was greater than the men, greater than the numbers and the vicious power and all the methods used to corrupt its name? Did he mean to affirm the principle, which they themselves had dreamed into being out of the chaos and darkness of the feudal past, and which they had violated and compromised to the point of absurdity even in their own corrupt minds? Or did he mean that we had to take the responsibility for all of it, for the men as well as the principle, because we were the heirs who must use the principle because no other fitted our needs? Not for the power or for vindication, but because we, with the given circumstance of our origin, could only thus find transcendence? Was it that we most of all, had to affirm the principle, the plan in whose name we had been brutalized and sacrificed, not because we would always be weak nor because we were afraid or opportunistic, but because we were older than they, in the sense of what it took to live in the world with others, and because they had exhausted in us, some, not much, but some, of the human greed and smallness, yes, and the fear and superstition that had kept them running. Oh, yes, they're running too, running all over themselves. Or was it, did he mean that we should affirm the principle because we, through no fault of our own, were linked to all the others in the loud, clamoring semi-visible world, that world seen only as a fertile field for exploitation by Jack and his kind, and with condescension by Norton and his, who were tired of being the mere pawns in the futile game of making history? Had he seen that for these two we had to say yes to the principle, lest they turn upon us to destroy both it and us? Agree 'em to death and destruction, grandfather had advised. Hell, weren't they their own death and their own destruction except as the principle lived in them and in us? And here's the cream of the joke, weren't we part of them as well as apart from them and subject to die when they died? I can't figure it out, it escapes me. But what do I really want, I've asked myself. Certainly not the freedom of a Reinhardt or the power of a Jack, nor simply the freedom not to run. No, but the next step I couldn't make, so I've remained in the hole. I'm not blaming anyone for this state of affairs, mind you, nor merely crying mea culpa. The fact is that you carry part of your sickness within you, at least I do as an invisible man. I carried my sickness, and though for a long time I tried to place it in the outside world, the attempt to write it down shows me that at least half of it lay within me. It came upon me slowly, like that strange disease that affects those black men whom you see turning slowly from black to albino, their pigment disappearing as under the radiation of some cruel, invisible ray. You go along for years knowing something is wrong, then suddenly you discover that you're as transparent as air. At first you tell yourself that it's all a dirty joke, or that it's due to the political situation. But deep down you come to suspect that you're yourself to blame, and you stand naked and shivering before the millions of eyes who look through you unseeingly. That is the real soul sickness, the spear in the side, the drag by the neck through the mob-angry town, the Grand Inquisition, the embrace of the maiden, the rip in the belly with the guts spilling out, the trip to the chamber with the deadly gas that ends in the oven so hygienically clean, only it's worse because you continue stupidly to live. But live you must, and you can either make passive love to your sickness or burn it out and go on to the next conflicting phase. Yes, but what is the next phase? How often have I tried to find it? Over and over again I've gone up above to seek it out. For, like almost everyone else in our country, I started out with my share of optimism. I believed in hard work and progress and action, but now, after first being for society and then against it, I assign myself no rank or any limit, and such an attitude is very much against the trend of the times. But my world has become one of infinite possibilities. What a phrase, still it's a good phrase and a good view of life. And a man shouldn't accept any other, that much I've learned underground. Until some gang succeeds in putting the world in a straitjacket, its definition is possibility. Step outside the narrow borders of what men call reality and you step into chaos, ask Reinhardt, he's a master of it, or imagination. That too I've learned in the cellar, and not by deadening my sense of perception. I'm invisible, not blind. No indeed. The world is just as concrete, ornery, violent, sublimely wonderful as before, only now I better understand my relation to it and it to me. I've come a long way from those days when, full of illusion, I lived a public life and attempted to function under the assumption that the world was solid and all the relationships therein. Now I know men are different and that all life is divided and that only individuation is their true health. Hence again I have stayed in my hole. Because up above there's an increasing passion to make men conform to a pattern. Just as in my nightmare, Jack and the boys are waiting with their knives, looking for the slightest excuse to ball the Jack, and I do not refer to the old dance step, although what they're doing is making the old eagle rock dangerously. Whence all this passion toward conformity anyway? Diversity is the word. Let man keep his many parts and you'll have no tyrant states. Why, if they follow this conformity business they'll end up by forcing me, an invisible man, to become white, which is not a color but the lack of one. Must I strive toward colorlessness? But seriously, and without snobbery, think of what the world would lose if that should happen. America is woven of many strands, I would recognize them and let it so remain. It's winner take nothing, that is the great truth of our country or of any country. Life is to be lived, not controlled, and humanity is won by continuing to play in face of certain defeat. Our fate is to become one, and yet many. This is not prophecy, but description. Thus one of the greatest jokes in the world is the spectacle of the whites busy escaping blackness and becoming blacker every day, and the black striving toward whiteness, becoming quite dull and gray. None of us seems to know who he is or where he's going. Which reminds me of something that occurred the other day in the subway. At first I saw only an old gentleman who for the moment was lost. I knew he was lost, for as I looked down the platform I saw him approach several people and turn away without speaking. He's lost, I thought, and he'll keep coming until he sees me, then he'll ask his direction. Maybe there's an embarrassment in it if he admits he's lost to a strange white man. Perhaps to lose a sense of where you are implies the danger of losing a sense of who you are. That must be it, I thought, to lose your direction is to lose your face. So here he comes to ask his direction from the lost, the invisible. Very well, I've learned to live without direction. Let him ask. But then he was only a few feet away and I recognized him. It was Mr. Norton. The old gentleman was thinner and wrinkled now but as dapper as ever. And seeing him made all the old life live in me for an instant, and I smiled with tear-stinging eyes. Then it was over, dead, and when he asked me how to get to Center Street, I regarded him with mixed feelings. "Don't you know me?" I said. "Should I?" He said. "You see me?" I said, watching him tensely. "Why, of course, sir. Do you know the way to Center Street?" "So. Last time it was the Golden Day, now it's Center Street." "You've retrenched, sir. But don't you know who I am?" "Young man, I'm in a hurry," he said, cupping a hand to his ear. "Why should I know you?" "Because I'm your destiny." "My destiny, did you say?" He gave me a puzzled stare, backing away. "Young man, are you well? Which train did you say I should take?" "I didn't say," I said, shaking my head. "Now, aren't you ashamed?" "Ashamed? Ashamed?" he said indignantly. I laughed, suddenly taken by the idea. "Because, Mr. Norton, if you don't know where you are, you probably don't know who you are. So you came to me out of shame. You are ashamed, now aren't you?" "Young man, I've lived too long in this world to be ashamed of anything." "Are you lightheaded from hunger?" "How do you know my name?" "But I'm your destiny, I made you." "Why shouldn't I know you?" I said, walking closer and seeing him back against a pillar. He looked around like a cornered animal. He thought I was mad. "Don't be afraid, Mr. Norton," I said. "There's a guard down the platform there. You're safe. Take any train, they all go to the Golden D." But now an express had rolled up and the old man was disappearing quite spryly inside one of its doors. I stood there laughing hysterically. I laughed all the way back to my hole. But after I had laughed I was thrown back on my thoughts. How had it all happened? And I asked myself if it were only a joke and I couldn't answer. Since then I've sometimes been overcome with a passion to return into that heart of darkness across the Mason-Dixon line. But then I remind myself that the true darkness lies within my own mind, and the idea loses itself in the gloom. Still the passion persists. Sometimes I feel the need to reaffirm all of it, the whole unhappy territory and all the things loved and unlovable in it, for all of it is part of me. Till now, however, this is as far as I've ever gotten, for all life seen from the whole of invisibility is absurd. So why do I write? Torturing myself to put it down. Because in spite of myself I've learned some things. Without the possibility of action, all knowledge comes to one labeled file and forget, and I can neither file nor forget. Nor will certain ideas forget me, they keep filing away at my lethargy, my complacency. Why should I be the one to dream this nightmare? Why should I be dedicated and set aside, yes, if not to at least tell a few people about it? There seems to be no escape. Here I've set out to throw my anger into the world's face, but now that I've tried to put it all down the old fascination with playing a role returns, and I'm drawn upward again. So that even before I finish I've failed. Maybe my anger is too heavy, perhaps, being a talker, I've used too many words. But I've failed. The very act of trying to put it all down has confused me and negated some of the anger and some of the bitterness. So it is that now I denounce and defend, or feel prepared to defend. I condemn and affirm, say no and say yes and say no. I denounce because though implicated and partially responsible, I have been hurt to the point of abysmal pain, hurt to the point of invisibility. And I defend because in spite of all I find that I love. In order to get some of it down I have to love. I sell you no phony forgiveness, I'm a desperate man, but too much of your life will be lost, its meaning lost, unless you approach it as much through love as through hate. So I approach it through division. So I denounce and I defend and I hate and I love. Perhaps that makes me a little bit as human as my grandfather. Once I thought my grandfather incapable of thoughts about humanity, but I was wrong. Why should an old slave use such a phrase as, this and this or this has made me more human, as I did in my arena speech? Hell, he never had any doubts about his humanity, that was left to his free offspring. He accepted his humanity just as he accepted the principle. It was his, and the principle lives on in all its human and absurd diversity. So now having tried to put it down I have disarmed myself in the process. You won't believe in my invisibility and you'll fail to see how any principle that applies to you could apply to me. You'll fail to see it even though death waits for both of us if you don't. Nevertheless, the very disarmament has brought me to a decision. The hibernation is over. I must shake off the old skin and come up for breath. There's a stench in the air, which, from this distance underground, might be the smell either of death or of spring. I hope of spring. But don't let me trick you, there is a death in the smell of spring and in the smell of thee as in the smell of me. And if nothing more, invisibility has taught my nose to classify the stenches of death. In going underground, I whipped it all except the mind. And the mind that has conceived a plan of living must never lose sight of the chaos against which that pattern was conceived. That goes for societies as well as for individuals. Thus, having tried to give pattern to the chaos which lives within the pattern of your certainties, I must come out, I must emerge. And there's still a conflict within me, with Louis Armstrong. One half of me says, open the window and let the foul air out, while the other says, it was good green corn before the harvest. Of course Louis was kidding, he wouldn't have thrown old bad air out, because it would have broken up the music and the dance, when it was the good music that came from the bell of old bad air's horn that counted. Old bad air is still around with his music and his dancing and his diversity, and I'll be up and around with mine. And, as I said before, a decision has been made. I'm shaking off the old skin and I'll leave it here in the hole. I'm coming out, no less invisible without it, but coming out nevertheless. And I suppose it's damn well time. Even hibernations can be overdone, come to think of it. Perhaps that's my greatest social crime. I've overstayed my hibernation, since there's a possibility that even an invisible man has a socially responsible role to play. Ah, I can hear you say, so it was all a build-up to bore us with his buggy jiving. He only wanted us to listen to him rave. But only partially true, being invisible and without substance, a disembodied voice, as it were. What else could I do? What else but try to tell you what was really happening when your eyes were looking through? And it is this which frightens me, who knows but that, on the lower frequencies, I speak for you.